My name is Justine Clark and I am the co-founder and director of Parla, and this series, Light at the End of the Tunnel, is a collaboration between Parla and Monash Architecture. We'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of country across Australia's many nations and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. And in particular, we acknowledge the people of the Greater Kulin Nations, who are the traditional custodians of the lands on which Monash operates and on which we are speaking from today. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and to the Indigenous Australians who are part of the Parla community. So welcome, number 18 in the Light at the End of the Tunnel series, where we look at architecture as a profession, a discipline and a practice, and how it is and will be affected by the pandemic. So normally my colleague Naomi Stead is here to do the introduction and welcome. She's moving house today, so you've got me, and I'm very delighted that I'm also joined by Kim Baisley, who's going to be my co-chair today. So today's session looks at career shifts and breaks and how we might use these productively, whether they're desired breaks or rather surprising and possibly unwanted breaks. This, I think, will follow on very well from our conversation last week. We're very lucky today to have Shelley Penn and Diana Tisevska here to help us talk about this, drawing on their own experiences. And Kim will introduce Shelley and Diana shortly. First, some protocols. Many of you have heard these many times before, but we'll go through them for those of you who are new, and welcome. So please keep your microphone on mute unless you're actually speaking, and we'd love it if you can keep your camera on if you're able to do that. We really like to be able to see that sort of wonderful mosaic of faces and have a sense of connection to you all as if we are really in an event. So these events are informal but informative. Kim and I will ask questions throughout to keep things flowing. And of course, we also take questions from the floor throughout. So if you have got something you would like to ask one of our speakers, please put it into the chat function. We'll be keeping an eye on that with help from my colleague Susie. And we'll ask people to pose their question directly. So if we do throw to you and you're able to, please put on your camera and ask your question, and we'll follow on from that. We also have really been enjoying the way people just write their observations and experiences into the chat. There's this fabulous parallel narrative that develops, and it's really great to see and hear what you think about what's being said and whether your experiences align with this or not. We can't get to all the questions, but please be assured that the questions you do ask, even if we don't manage to address them in this session, do really inform what we're doing at Parla and with this series in particular. So, welcome everybody. Welcome Kim. Would you like to introduce Diana and Shelley?
Justine. So today we're really blessed to have with us a couple of architectural luminaries and good friends of Parla, Shelley Penn and Diana Tisevska. Their stories are very different, but both feature responses to changed circumstances and environments, and that's a reality for many of us, especially at the moment. What characterises both of these women is the pursuit of a particular passion and involvement in substantially contributing to the public realm. In Diana's case, this has been as an architect for significant buildings within the public domain, amongst them the twin timber commercial buildings by Lendlease at Barangaroo International House and Darramoo House. These exemplify Diana's acknowledged expertise in mass timber construction and sustainability. For Shelley, after an earlier career crafting beautiful small projects, the contribution more recently has been in advocacy and representation, both in leadership roles like Associate Government, Victorian Government Architect, Deputy Chair of the Heritage Council of Victoria, and as the third female president of the Australian Institute of Architects, and also in teaching, writing, and participation in juries and review panels. Both women share a passion for excellence and design quality in the built environment, and both have chosen quite different ways of pursuing that passion. I'm not going to go into a great deal of detail with respect to the careers of these two women. Instead, we'll start our session today by asking them to tell us a little about the various shifts and breaks that have been part of their careers to date. And I'm hoping, Deanna, we can start with your story. You were involved at Zarnes Architects for a long time, 18 years. Now you're collaborating with other sizes and types of practices. And we're, Justine and I are wondering what kind of insights you've gained from working in these different contexts.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Kim, and thank you, Justine and Paula. It's really great to be here and be part of this conversation. I might just kind of, before I answer that question, give a little bit of context. I have had 2 career breaks. One was planned and the other was unplanned. And so I'm hoping that from my experience, people will be able to get something out of it in terms of how to manage these shifts in career. So the first career break that I had, which was significant, was about 3 years ago. I was wrapping up a very wonderful project, but a very demanding project. And I really needed to kind of take a bit of time out to reassess and think about what was next. And in fact, I was actually thinking about a total career change. So totally moving away from architecture. I actually did a course in nutrition and thought very seriously about pursuing that. So when I say totally unrelated to architecture, it was really completely opposite direction. So I took 6 months off. And it was really just such an incredibly valuable thing to do, to step back and to really think about my life as a whole and what I wanted to do and what kind of contribution I wanted to make. And what was really interesting about that was that at the end of the 6 months, I answered my own big question, which was, do I want to be an architect? And I was very pleasantly surprised to find that it was a deep, resounding yes, I most definitely do want to be an architect. So it was really great to kind of put that big question to bed and move forward with a level of certainty around that. And so the more recent unplanned break was earlier this year. I took a redundancy from Zarnes. Again, I really took it as an opportunity to realign and reassess what I wanted to do with my future in the context of my life. What was really interesting was obviously there are global events as a backdrop to all of this. There was a lot of fear generally in the world and within myself as well. When we're faced with the unknown, that's generally what happens. And I really had to kind of rein myself in and not take any action from a sense of panic, but to really kind of take the next steps in a very conscious and purposeful way. So I had about 3 months off, and then it was really interesting how things unfolded from there. Opportunities came up from people that I knew, and yes, since then I've had a chance to collaborate with a couple of different size practices, and it's been an extremely eye-opening experience because obviously I'd been in a bubble for a really long time, an amazing bubble, a fantastic team at Zarnes. And what's been incredible is just seeing the sheer amount of varied talent that we have in the profession. So many amazing people that just really want to do really great work and collaborate together. It's been just incredible to see that. And also just to see how different practices approach design has also been really eye-opening, and also how they manage the operational side of their practices and the more practical side of things, like from very established practices that have really strong systems in place that facilitate the way the business is run, to incredible design culture where there's models and drawings everywhere pinned up, and there's a sense of design culture being deeply ingrained into who they are. So that's a very long answer to that first question.
No, that's good. We're after the story, so that's excellent. Shelley, your working life also involves shifting between different roles and realms. You know, you've gone from practice, government, institutional roles, advisory in the private sector. Can you explain a little about how what the advantages of moving between these different spheres has been for you? Or as part of telling your story, I guess. It will emerge.
Yeah, well, multiple advantages. I think the chief amongst them is a kind of an authentic pathway, I guess, something that's fulfilling, and I'm not sure that I'm there yet, but that's not to say things haven't been fulfilling. Some of you people know some of my story, but so apologies, many and hopefully most of you don't. I'll just try to recap. I never really have thought of my working life as a career, except when people ask me about my career, and that might actually relate to how it's run. I mean, I possibly a bit passive in my approach. I sort of took on architecture because it was suggested to me, you know, by a career guidance counsellor at the nth degree at school at last minute. But having taken it on, I did it and enjoyed it at university. And as soon as I finished, I was actually working part-time through the last few years of my degree. As soon as I finished, I quit and I went and worked at George's department store. I don't know if anybody knew George's. Most of you are probably way too young. But George's was a fabulous department store in Collins Street in Melbourne, and I quit my architecture job and went and worked there in gentlemen's accessories, which was really boring, but I was good at dusting shelves. And then from that, ended up doing some work for the store manager, and they were renovating their hostess store. And I ended up working with her in some ways, not doing any design or anything. And I went and did another course completely unrelated at RMIT, which I really loved. And then my old boss in architecture said, can you come back because we've got this great project and we promise we'll pay you a bit better this time. And I said, okay, because I was poor. And then I kind of got caught up in it again. Anyway, that I did, as Kim said, did then at some point decide to practice, did that really intensely. But for about 7 years, until I was in my mid-30s, but I found myself questioning its my level of satisfaction and its meaning to me, even though I was really dedicated and focused and had some fantastic support, for example, in Kylie Fitt, who I can see here today, hi Kylie, who worked for me for a while. I ultimately followed my gut feeling and stepped away from that, moved to Sydney, so I physically dislocated myself. So I sort of made choices, and I feel like I could use the whole hour going on about that, which would be very boring, so I won't. But I've bounced backwards and forwards in terms of architecture and doing a range of different things. The advantage, it's been hard, but primarily or predominantly it's been chosen. I did have a baby which was unplanned, but it was kind of fortuitous because I needed to step out. It really enabled me to step out and reflect again, which is probably a pattern in my career of sort of taking steps aside or step out and reflecting and thinking about what I really want to be doing, what's meaningful to me, how I can contribute, or what are my skills. And I think, to try to answer your question, the main benefit has been progressively getting to understand myself better. That may sound egocentric, and it probably is, but hopefully so that I then do better in the world in relation to other people or work that I do. And that's about understanding kind of innate attributes, stuff that I probably can't and will never be able to change, but also things that I've developed as skills and that I value as skills. And then also recognising complete gaps and weaknesses and things that I'm not good at and unlikely to be good at, or just don't particularly want to be good at, and being honest with myself about that. And at the same time trying to identify what's meaningful and valuable, and both personally as well as professionally. So absolutely building into and prioritising things that are valuable to me personally, which are my children, but also stuff in me that I need in my life. And kind of what is life all about is the underpinning question for me.
Yeah,
so I don't know if that's answering your question, but
no, I think it's also interesting that, you know, you probably developed a whole lot of different perspectives doing different kind of work that, you know, private practice part probably actually really helped with a lot of the advisory roles that you've done, you know, that they're all intersecting.
Yeah. I think part of what I've learned, and in fact one thing I've only really recognised in the last couple of years, is my first job was as a shop assistant in a chemist, where I worked from the age of 13 till I was 21 every week, all day Saturday and every Sunday morning. And you kind of think, oh yeah, that's just earning a job, earning money and getting by. But in fact, what I learned was communication skills and a degree of selling. I was pretty good at selling blue Stratos and sandalwood oil and stuff like that when people would come in looking for presents for their nephews and nieces. And I realised that's actually a skill that I've got, which is really relevant to being an advocate for architecture and for benefits in the public realm, reading people, listening to what it is they're trying to achieve, and finding ways to address that need in a genuine way, but also to kind of inform about what it is that you think is a value that can help with that. And that's actually been quite consistent through all of the different jobs that I've done. And in fact, now what I do primarily is 75% of my work easily would be as a director, on boards. And it's also strategic. It's about strategy and policy, and they're also kind of consistent. So partly it's about recognising things as well as recognising strengths, as I said, and weaknesses. Yeah.
Diana, the one coming back to your story, you know, 18 years is a really long time to be within the one sort of worldview, I guess. Obviously, you had different periods within that where you were in different roles. But when you took the redundancy from Zanus, how did you deal with that? You know, a significant change where you were no longer Diana of Zanus, but you were Diana. How do you adjust to that change of perspective? And, you know, what sort of resources did you need? I mean, did you have, you know, did it affect your confidence? You know, that obviously it was a external environmental thing with the economy and changes in work. But yeah, just interested to know how you dealt with that and what sort of process it caused you to embark upon.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, obviously, 18 years is a very long time, and a lot of life happens during that time. And definitely a part of my identity was definitely embedded in being part of that team. And so what the thing is that there were some natural human emotions that came up when all of that unfolded. And it's very normal and very natural, and I just allowed myself to feel them and not avoid them, and I was really surprised at how quickly that dissipated. And what I was left with was a really deep appreciation for my time there, and thinking back on not just the incredible projects, but making lifelong friends and being supported through all the challenges and the triumphs by the practice during that time. So yeah, normal human emotions, but a really deep sense of appreciation. And then really it was, I really saw it as an opportunity. I know it sounds a little bit cliched and everyone seems to talk about that, but I really did. I really saw it as an opportunity to realign and reassess and really think about the next 18 years. And, you know, also being conscious of how quickly that 18 years went. So I didn't really want to be in a position where I fall into something by default and then I blink and then another 18 years is gone and then that's essentially the end of my career. So yeah, so really taking sort of time off to not do very much at all. I wasn't particularly productive in that 3 months other than sort of sorting out some things around my home. Really, it was just having that time and that space to move forward with purpose and in a conscious way. And then the question about confidence, I think, is a really important one. And yes, it definitely experienced a bit of a shake in my confidence. But then I found that once I started to do my resume, and there was just something about seeing what I'd done for 18 years in black and white in front of me that kind of made me realize, yeah, I've actually done quite a lot and I'm quite experienced. And but probably the biggest confidence boost has been working again and working with people and seeing where I sit within, I guess, my own career and my own place. So yeah, just very normal stuff.
Yeah, I mean, because anyone who's been in the industry for a while has, you know, a lot of us who've been in the industry for a while have you know, suffered redundancy at one point or another. It's just the nature of a cyclical industry. But, you know, even though you know in your head that it's, you know, that it's about the work situation, you still, it somehow can still seem like a bit of a personal rejection. You know, why me? Why not someone else? So it's, you know, working through that it's interesting that you found that process of reflecting on your skills and what you actually still have to contribute. That's a really good kind of tip, I think.
Even when you, even when it's not your choice, like a redundancy, I've certainly found self-doubt has been an ongoing part of a cycle of including the choices. As I said, I've generally made the choices, but often they've been driven by self-doubt. And in fact, just the last few weeks, I've been, like a lot of people, sorting out old stuff in the time of COVID, in Melbourne in particular, where we're trapped. But I've kept everything. In fact, back to end of high school. So I found old year 11 essays in year 12. Bit scary, and all of my job files of the stuff that I did when I was just practicing in a really intense way, which was only 7 years, but really intense practice. And I was really good at being diligent. And my files are fabulous; they're really great. Like every file note, it's so well recorded. Like, and actually, the work was really well. The advice to clients, I've just skimmed some of it. Mainly, I'm just going chuck it, just throw it out, which is. But I'm feeling quite traumatized because I'm thinking, what the hell was all that for? All of that diligence and all of that care and all of that attention and all of that, you know, there's a few buildings out there that hopefully are all right. I'm not wanting to be negative. I'm just being honest about, you know, questioning all those things that we do. And I mean, when I chose to step out when I was mid-30s and I moved to Sydney and decided to stop practicing intensely. That was very hard. You asked about credibility and identity. For me, that was a big thing about if I'm not an architect, who am I? Because I was choosing to leave. How will I be credible and valid in the world if I'm not an architect? Because I put everything into that identity. So it took me about a year to get through that whole question. And I think
you spend so long developing this expertise in a very particular specialized area. It does, then and if you stop doing that, you start thinking, well, what have I got to offer? I totally hear you.
It's also a narrow idea about what one should be. It's all the should, those voices that are in you, but you know, you hear from outside about what is appropriate or what is credible. And back in the olden days when I did it, it was, you know, it was the architect whipping themselves in the garret for, you know, being solely focused and it's the Howard Rourke sort of model, you know, which is really false and not helpful.
Yeah. How have you learned from either of you? How have you learned from people that you've worked with in that sense of watching particularly other women in their careers? Like, has that been an influence on you, or is it really just you've just tried to forge your own path?
In my case, probably forging my own path, but certainly have looked at and learned from others not in terms of a pathway, but in terms of attributes and ways of tackling the human side of it all, of living, making choices.
What about you, Deanna? Have there been people that have inspired you in particular ways in terms of how they've managed those shifts and changes?
Yeah, of course, yes. Yeah, I've been very lucky. I've been so lucky to work with so many incredible people, men and women, and really just seeing how to deal with. I mean, not necessarily this type of situation, but seeing very challenging situations arise and how to deal with them with calm and with certainty and professionalism, really. So that's really my biggest takeaway from watching how people deal with challenges.
Mm. Is that probably Kimberly Q? Are you able to? Do you want to pose your comment, because I think it's just picking up on some of the reflection on achievement that Shelley was talking about.
Hi, I think it was, thanks for selecting the question. I think for me, I was having a conversation with another friend of mine this morning where we talked about that we're always constantly on the go. And then when we stop, we're so forward focused that we forget to look back and then just be proud and celebrate some of the things that we've done, because everything that we do is a step for us to grow and to get somewhere. I think, like, just from even the conversations, everybody's saying that they're kind of listening to their own self, and it's true, because we don't realize how much we've grown until we have the time to sit with our thoughts and think about it. And I think this pandemic has kind of allowed some people to be able to do that, and some have yet to be able to look back and realize that they have done quite a lot of things and feel a bit positive about it as well. So
yeah. That's a great insight, Kimberly. And it's kind of like sitting with the doubt stuff, or sitting with uncertainty and not feeling like you have to solve it or fix it or be something, and just allowing that stuff to watch and not be hard on yourself, but at the same time be honest.
It's amazing what time and space can do. Really, it's just so valuable. And you're so right when you say that we are constantly on the go, and when it's busy, it's really busy, and there's no time to pause and to step back and to reassess and get a feel for where we're at in life. And so, great insight.
Yeah, I think it was from your comment about looking at your CV in black and white. That was the first thing I realized. Oh, we all have accomplished something quite a fair bit. It's just that it's because it's not as physical or as obvious that it's hard for us to celebrate it as much as we should. So, yeah.
Shelley, I happen to know that you've also occasionally thought of leaving architecture entirely, and have done that at periods, and then kind of, for me at least, it seems you always, you kind of step out and then you step back into a kind of place which always seems more interesting, which is, I think, I mean, many people, faced with a kind of break, are very frightened about how to get back in. And I'm just kind of interested in, I mean, and you counseled me through my leaving of a job at one point, which with exactly the sort of point that opportunities will arise. Now, obviously, we're in a pandemic and it's a harder situation, but I'm just really interested in that you seem to me to sort of step out and then step back in somewhere slightly differently. I'm kind of interested in that process as a kind of way of charting, if not a career, then a kind of life in architecture.
Yeah, thanks, Justine. You've definitely done that. And yes, I think I encourage you to jump off the cliff. I mean, I kind of...
Good advice, really good advice.
Well, I mean, yeah, pick your cliff and, do check what's at the bottom and stuff. And you're right, it's a bit harder in times like now when work is scarce and the world economy is so uncertain, and that's a bit tougher. But I have done that, and it is a process of questioning and just taking a bit of a plunge. Usually comes back to my gut feeling, if I keep going on this path, or if I decide to just take that path, which is pretty uncertain, I don't know where it's going to lead, but which one, okay, I'm going to do that. And then if I feel my heart kind of sinking, I think, nah, that I've got to do the other one. So kind of trusting my instinct after doing lots of questioning. But I think it's it's about meaning and value for me. And I mean, so I left in my practice, I was really focused on doing projects and trying to hopefully do decent stuff and detail them well and so on. And I was kind of good at it in that realm. I didn't push and practice far enough to really test whether I could keep going or not. So I put that in that little box. But then I've just lost my train of thought. But I did step out because I questioned whether that could sustain me in terms of value. If I kept going for another 30 years doing what I was doing then, where would I be? And I thought, well, maybe hopefully I'd have some more and better projects that I'd be really proud of. That'd be good. And hopefully I'd be earning some more money and I would have had time to have some holidays and do stuff like that. But beyond that, I was thinking, I think the rest will be the same, which is I'll be half really, really enjoying it, half really stressed about stuff. Is that enough for me? No, it doesn't feel like it. And so that's kind of a prompt to look elsewhere. And initially I took a jump and moving to Sydney. I didn't know I didn't know what was going. It was an opportunity to go because my partner at the time was going up there. So I just chose to step out, and I'd saved enough to keep me going for a few months. And, you know, I just thought I'd see what would happen. And that then it was serendipitous because it meant that I was in a position to take up a role with public architecture and government, and that led me into working with government. And I thought, oh yeah, well maybe doing public work will be more satisfying in terms of the sense of meaning that I'm trying to find. And then, you know, I stepped out of that 18 months later when I got pregnant, as I said earlier, which wasn't planned, but I was a bit cynical about government at that point. So the pendulum kind of swung from being small practice focused, Howard Rourke, flogging myself, kind of loving that, it not quite working, going to government, public outcomes, that's really good, feeling a bit cynical about government and how that works, and sort of, but then it's ended up being in between where I've kind of allowed myself to step back into architecture and keep this other stuff going. You could say it's hedging a bit, maybe, doing advisory work and consulting. From a practical point of view, advisory and consulting is also kind of good because it pays better for a shorter period of time with less commitment. So unlike an architectural project where you're usually committed for, you know, 12 to 18 months to much, much longer in the really big projects, I could do a consultancy and kind of get paid on an hourly rate, not always. So it's smaller, less commitment, and can keep you going financially. So, you know, in later life, I specifically chose that when I was doing certain things because I just needed for the finances to be under control so I could pay the mortgage. And I actually didn't have the drive, is where I've got to really pursue architecture in the way that I felt it should be pursued. And I applaud others who do it in that way. So it's, yeah, I don't know if that kind of addresses what you're saying.
No, that's good. I mean, we've got the chat's going off. There's some really great questions here. I'm just going to throw firstly to Badru, another of our absolute stalwarts at this series. Badru always has a fabulous question, but it follows on pretty directly from what you've just been saying. Shelley, are you there today, Bud? Where are you, Badru?
Yes. Can you see me? Finally fixed the webcam.
Excellent.
So based on what you were just saying, Shelley, I think I put the question simultaneously as you're speaking. You know, it's really great every time I think, oh, okay, I'm going to work for 3 or 4 years and then I'm going to take a break and think about where I'm going, how I'm getting there. But then often this is reality that we don't have, like many people don't have the, you know, financial safety net and that kind of thing. So often a break is a privilege. So as much as I would like to take it, maybe I can't. So I've often thought about this and I thought, oh, should I engage in teaching? Should I engage in I don't know, moonlight or something, like, you know, become a dog walker, cat walker or something, you know, so that I've got that side thing going. And then, so if I want to take a break from architecture, I can. But at the same time, running 2 jobs, it's not easy, whether it's teaching or whatever. And then you might have family commitments and things like that. So how can you like balance on an everyday, day-to-day busy life and kind of find that time or find that little thing, oh, should I do it once every 3 months?
Yeah.
So that we can focus, like basically reflect on where I'm going.
I think it's a great question, and it's really so relevant. It draws out a key point that I think I've learned about myself, but I think it's relevant elsewhere, hopefully, which is that there are certain things that are part of you. For example, I'm pretty much an introvert and I like working by myself. And that means that I'm very happy doing my own thing, working from home, which gives me enormous flexibility, reduces my overheads. You know, I don't have to commit to someone else, which actually could be a bit of a problem I need to work on with a psychologist, but, you know, is actually a thing that gives me freedoms as well. So if you're the sort of person who really thrives in a team and you really know you find it hard to work alone, you really get your energy from other people, you probably need to be in a practice or an organisation that has some scale. So that's a different thing. It's not right or wrong, it's just different people. So, but finding what is your comfort zone, I think, is part of that. And then, yes, there are risks in stepping out, and certainly when I first took those risks, I did step back from as I said, I graduated from architecture. I'd had a job for 3 years in a fabulous small practice, working full on, really inspiring and great. And I stepped out of that to go and work in a department store. I wasn't earning much money as a young student architect, but I was earning even less as someone dusting shelves. But I didn't have dependents. I was just paying rent. You know, I could do it at that time. And then as you get children and other accoutrements, you know, that becomes harder. You've got responsibilities. So finding a way through, but I think it's about priorities and shoring your path up. I think in my case, what you were just describing about doing a mix of things has worked. At the moment, I've got, for example, 3 roles that are all on contracts of 3 years that I was very lucky to have just had renewed at the end of last year, which has given me certainty in this current time, which is profoundly different than I would have been several years ago when I was relying more on consultancies and other bits and pieces coming and going. So that's just luck. That's just luck. But having a few different things means that I do have a bit of structure and certainty, like I did when I started practice, where I taught, and that gave me some regular money, not a lot, but I could rely on it. And then projects would come and go and, you know, fall over every so often, as you would all have experienced. So I think it's a combination of, yes, a bit of a mix, but also who are you and what do you need, and then what's an environment for you. And sometimes you have to bide your time and say, for the time being, I'm just going to stick with this position because I've got it and I know it's stable and I can keep going, but I'm going to work towards, in 2 years or 3 years, that goal that I think I need to do, that break or whatever it is. And, you know, I don't think that's a new advice, but that's...
No, but thank you. That's actually... that's really great to hear. Sorry, I'll ask a quick one as well. When you left that job, did you feel afraid? Because sometimes I'm afraid, what if I don't get anything better? You know, like, there's this fear as well.
I feel afraid all the time.
There's a lot of nodding heads right now.
Totally. I mean, I feel at the moment I'm doing something which is really scary, that is nothing to do with architecture, but it's something I've probably wanted to do. Well, I know I have for 30 years and I've been afraid of all along. And I've been afraid because I might be really bad at it. It's not going to earn me money, even if I'm really good at it. And I need to pay my mortgage. You know, I'm not independently wealthy, unfortunately. But I kind of know I have to do it. So what I'm doing, I've got to build up my structure in terms of finances. I've got some certainty, but I'm carving space to do this other thing that I just need to try. So, and I'm probably relatively privileged because I've been around for a while now and I've got some certainty and I can build on some of my experience to have that certainty. But, you know, at the end of next year, that certainty is going to disappear because my various contracts will end. So in a 6 months' time, I'm going to be planning for how can I shore up a position that in another 18 months, I know there'll be some work coming in. I mean, yeah, always afraid. But at the end of the day, what matters? What do you need? You know, that's another question.
Not to sound pessimistic, but, you know, when everybody was nodding with the fear part, I was thinking, misery does love company, and I was thinking about myself.
Yeah.
I think if you're not a little, if you're not a little bit scared, then, you know.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. It's interesting though, there's such great questions, and I was actually hoping that both of those questions will come up in this discussion. The first one being, taking a break is a privilege. And I think that that's a really important point, and Shelley's just answered it so perfectly. Just to add a little bit more perspective on that is, I certainly don't have unlimited resources. In fact, I'm the sole income earner of my household, and I have a child to support. But it's actually really amazing how things line up and align when you know that you need that break. Things just tend to work out. And I know that that sounds a little bit vague, and it is a little bit vague, but it's possible is all I'm trying to say. And Shelley's tips on how to do that were very valuable, I thought.
Oh, thank you both. Thank you.
Okay, I've got Susie sending me messages about great questions. There's stacks of them. I
was going to suggest that Julie McLennan's question might be a good one for Deanna.
Exactly where I was about to go, Kim. Whereas one.
Julie, do you want to?
Julie, where are you?
So my question was, any tips that you have for us on explaining or selling your periods of time out or your portfolio career to recruiters and employers who might have a more linear view of how they expect a CV to look?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I haven't actually even seen any recruiters. Like I mentioned before, both of the opportunities have come up through people that I know. And what I've actually found really interesting is that the practices I've been talking to actually see these breaks as a really positive thing. And it's never really, I haven't felt the need to have to explain away why I've taken a break. It's very interesting what happens when you're just completely authentic and honest about what's happened. So I have no qualms about saying that 3 years ago I had 6 months off because I was really wondering whether I was in the right profession. And also sometimes people don't ask why. And I think that that's okay as well. I think that really just being yourself and being honest and authentic about where you're at is really what employers are really valuing.
I was going to ask, if I could, just listening to both of you talk about how you've found your own way of expressing value and meaning in your career. You've almost set your own bar. I was just going to ask, do you have any advice on how to actually create your own level? You know, our society is full of pressure, in our industry in particular, about achieving certain things, being a certain kind of architect, like particularly a design architect, as opposed to, say, for example, somebody who's really good at documentation. That's just one example, but how do you listen to your own voice in that respect of setting your own, you know? I've just been thinking lately, you know, there's a lot of pressure with ISO to, are you living your best life? You know, are you doing all the things that you should? As Justine was saying earlier, there's a lot of shoulds. So how have you worked that through in your own mind about what you want to be?
Yeah, I might kick it off if that's okay. It's really, you know, it's not, I think the first thing is to recognize that there's no race going on. There's no need to benchmark yourself against what someone else is doing, particularly your peers. Like when I look at the people that I went to uni with, like some of them are doing extraordinary things, and it's wonderful. But I've got my own life and my own priorities, and I think it's really tricky to recognize that, or to balance out knowing that there's a season for everything in life. And we all, well, from what the people I talk to, we all seem to suffer from this compulsion of wanting to do it all and do it all at once. I firmly believe that we can have it all, just not all at the same time. So when my child was very small, for me, it was a priority to spend time with her. And yes, my career was also important, but my child was the most important thing at that time. And now as she's sort of getting a little bit older, I'm finding that my career focus is again sort of shifting, and So I firmly believe we can have it all, but we just don't necessarily have to have it all at the same time.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that. I'd also say that I think there's a lot of, in my case anyway, reconciliation with self. And what I mean by that is, I think one of the things I faced when I decided to quit my practice, it's just, which I didn't do fully, but, you know, when I was doing just practicing in that intense way in my late 20s, early 30s, was a kind of feeling that I was trying to prove myself and having to say to myself, whose approval am I seeking? Who is it that I'm looking for a pat on the back from? And realizing actually no one's going to give me a pat on the back. There might be, somebody might say, oh, that's great, and publish it, which is, you know, fabulous. And also, or my, you know, friends might say, oh, you're fabulous, or whatever. But none of those really satisfy what's going on. And I probably had to think about my relation with my parents and blah, 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 that kind of stuff. It was really about recognizing that I'm the only judge of what is right for me and what I need and what is success. So sometimes I'll get people say things now, oh, you're really successful. And I don't want to diminish that or be falsely modest either. And so, yes, I guess that's right. From a perspective, a certain perspective, you could look at the things that are on my CV and there is success there, like the president of the institute or whatever, and they are valuable and they're meaningful and I did work hard at them and all that. But they kind of feel like somebody else over there in a way. And they're not, they're also part of me. But I keep coming back to what's the core of me and what is success for me. So it's a constant job of sort of separating out and sifting out all those voices that from the outside or the outside measures, the things that what others or society or what we perceive as being society's measures of success, and trying to identify what is it that actually makes me feel successful. And that's why I'm doing this thing I mentioned before, which has got nothing to do with architecture. No one's ever going to pay me for whatever, but I hope will be good. And, you know, the thing is, what I've realised is if I work really hard and give it everything that I can, I reckon I'll be satisfied, even if it comes out and it's awful. I'll know I really tried hard at it. And that will be my measure of success.
How do you both of you are really committed to design excellence in obviously different spheres, but how do you balance that sort of that quest for perfection, I guess, which is part of what we do as architects and as people that review architecture? How do you balance that against that, you know, that inevitable question of whether I'm meeting that bar? It's a bit of a tough one for architects, I think, because so much of what we're about is about this.
It's all about definition. It's all about definition of what is excellence and what. I mean, I used to obsess about the detail of the door jamb and whether I could get some sort of seamless thing going on. Nowadays, I just do not have the patience or energy for that, and I really have no interest in it, to be honest. I hope someone else does it because I think the details matter. So I really hope someone else is going to pay attention to that, you know. But in fact, to be really honest with you, my focus has shifted so that I find it hard to get excited. I used to look at architectural magazines and I could drool and be, you know, salivate over how gorgeous the stuff was, and they just don't turn me on anymore. It's not right or wrong. It's just about what for you is valuable. So my focus has shifted. So I think excellence is about hard work and diligence. It's not about some outside idea. And whether if you're fabulous at doing detailed drawings or fabulous at talking to someone on site or doing conceptual stuff or being strategic, whatever, they're all their forms of excellence. And I think it's probably about therefore valuing them, but not judging. We actually need all of it. I don't know if that answers that question.
Yeah, no, I think it does, because it's sort of, it's also about appreciating that, as you were saying before, as we've all been saying, that we all have particular gifts and talents and passions as well, you know, things that we care about. So it makes sense that you can also appreciate that others are really good at, you know, the detail on the door jamb.
Need it.
And
Yeah.
thank God for that.
Yeah.
You know, yeah. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
Sorry, Justine, you go. With
There
one
you
of
go.
them.
I wondered if we might throw to Sarah Cooper and her question about and maybe Diana can speak to this about. Anyway, Sarah, where are you? Your question about
Hi.
timeout. Hi.
Hi. No, I was just wondering because, like, you know, we've talked a little bit about, you know, can you take breaks? Is it, you know, a feasible thing to take breaks, and sort of different lengths of breaks? Like sometimes they're 6 months, sometimes they're 1 month, sometimes they're longer. And I just wondered if you'd learned anything from your breaks, or any sort of practices or any sort of tips and tricks about how to sort of think about your career and how to think about and like look at your career with your lifestyle. And I don't know, I just wondered if you'd sort of learn anything practical from your breaks, or anything sort of that we could bring back into a career, so we don't wait for a crisis point, or we don't wait for a point where we're really struggling with life and we're sort of at a dip. Like, how do we actually sort of monitor where we are and sort of, you know, make a little bit more forward planning, or just be aware of where we are so we can stop before we crash.
Yeah, it's I have to say, I found it tough in our industry because it is so cyclical, and when it's busy, it's very, very busy, and busy for a long time. So someone else said it perfectly before, that it's really hard to think about these things to a level of depth that you get when you actually take a break. So I think that probably the most practical thing I can say about taking a break is just allow yourself this time and space to think about what you want to a much deeper level than you otherwise have available to you when you're very busy. So really, to not make any decisions out of panic, I think, is really important. To be really conscious about how you want to align your work and your life. And the other thing is also about building relationships in your career, about making strong contacts, and because it's amazing how these things come back around in a full circle, you know, hearing from people you haven't heard from in a really long time. And it's establishing authentic relationships is just so invaluable, because when you do take a break, those are people and resources that you can draw on.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I was just having a vivid memory, actually, of the first time Justine Clark called me when I was living in Sydney. And what I learned when I had that break with my sort of my second, or one of multiple breaks, but when I had my first child, and I said, okay, I'm going to have a year off. I couldn't really afford to have a year off, but we thought we maybe could. I had a partner at the time, so that helped in terms of managing finances, but I had a baby as well. But what I ended up doing was I learned the value of collaboration. So on the relationship stuff. So, and also being able to ask for help. So one of the things which is a strength for me, is that I'm independent, and that actually has been a strength in terms of my career, because I'm employed, or I'm engaged to offer independent advice. So that's an actual literal strength in that sense. It's also a weakness, because I'm not much good at asking for help. But I did learn that a little bit in that year, and started some collaborative work. And the reason that was good was because it allowed me to have some income that I didn't have to drive solely for myself, which when I had a kid and all that stuff was very hard. So that was learning the value of that. And then out of collaborating came other sorts of strengths. So that works for me. If you're someone who needs to work in practice with others with structure, it's probably different things that you'll get. And yes, I was remembering Justine calling me, and I was in my crappy little spare room, piled up with a whole lot of junk. There was the baby. I just got to sleep, I think. And do you remember, Justine? You called me, and I think you're asking about, I can't remember what, but you introduced yourself. And I had the impression that she thought I was in this fabulous office, you know. It was like, no. Anyway.
No, I remember I remember you saying, what do you want from me? Well, not quite those words, but you were kind of, anyway, I had to push through a little bit. But
Well,
I also remember the first time we met, your kid tipped a cup of tea all over me.
That's right.
And you decided I was okay because I managed to cope with that quite well.
That's right.
And then years later, we were in a meeting together, our tiny babies. Anyway, we could go on for hours.
No, but that memory is good that you said, what did I want from you? That's right. And I still do that, maybe not as bluntly, but I think that's reasonable advice. If I get a call, we thought someone's, you know, you gave us your name.
The kid from Architecture Australia.
Or yes, somebody, we thought, are you interested in this project? And I will always say, maybe, yeah. You know, what is it that you think I can offer you? Because I actually am probably trying to work out what is their perception of my strengths. And I might go, yeah, I think I can do that. Or no, that's not me. You know, so that's quite useful too.
Okay, we're running out of time. I'm quite keen. I know lots of people are in you know, difficult career break situations at the moment, and I'd like to sort of end with some advice about that. But I just think it'd be good. Look, there's so many questions I want to go to, but Vanessa, where are you? Can you ask? I think you've got a good question here that might be a good last question about. You there, Vanessa?
Hear me?
Vanessa Coxhead.
I can see her.
Oh, great.
Yeah, can you hear me though?
Yes.
Yes.
Speak up.
Kia ora from New Zealand.
Kia ora.
I'm loving joining in on these calls. I just had a question around when you're in practice and other people, I guess, start to make the decisions for you about what you're good at and what your pathway might be. And if you have any suggestions about how you can turn those conversations into a more positive response and start to drive that yourself, rather than let it be driven by other people seeing that you're good at or not good at certain things.
Yeah, I think that's really hard. And it's very gendered, as Justine and others have got all the data to show it, and we've probably all experienced on both sides, both ways, or all genders, I'll say. I think look, the reality is we do have to be diplomatic in life. So I think just charging in and saying things should be like this or that, as I'm sure people have found, doesn't always work for you. So having some flex, but I think also speaking for yourself and seeking opportunities in a literal way. And I think also asking, for me, that relates to asking, not having practiced in big organisations much at all. I've only done a little bit of that, so I'll be quiet in a second because I think Diana, I'm sure, will have some commentary. But I think asking and speaking, saying what it is that you really want to develop and asking for feedback about maybe not in the same conversation, or, you know, but, or maybe in the same conversation, and sort of having the confidence that you can do that work that you want to be doing is probably number one. But also recognising that you may have skills to learn. You may not be there yet, but you want it. And so seeking clear advice and honest, direct advice about how you may not always get that opportunity, but that's, you know, I think it's important. Backing yourself.
Cool, thank you.
I don't know if that's how I feel like, Diana, you might be able to talk to that more. I just,
yeah, sure. I think it's yeah, so just to recap, the question is, if you're kind of, I guess, being put into a box of what others think you're particularly good at, but you actually want to be focusing on some other aspect of what you do, I think then you need to have some very honest conversations, but also really be honest with yourself and ask yourself, well, this thing that I want to be doing that I'm not doing right now because I'm doing the other thing, well, am I at a point where do I need to develop in this area, or am I at a point where I can take this and run with it and do really well at it? Because how you respond will depend on that answer. So being really honest with yourself, and then also if it is an area for development, then getting some mentoring is, I think, a very valuable thing to do. And from someone that you admire that has those qualities and does that particular, whatever it is, role really, really well. So I think it's definitely possible to shift perceptions of yourself, but you have to be very active in that process rather than being passive and allowing those decisions to be made for you, and also creating opportunities for yourself. in your daily tasks to focus more on the thing that you really want to be doing, and perhaps delegating a little bit more of the thing that you're very good at, but want to be doing a little bit less of.
Yeah, I agree. I think that point about self-reflection and self-honesty is so critical, that, you know, and that's where it gets difficult, because we get tangled up into the core of ourselves and who we are and who we want to be. And it can be hard to hear that actually people don't think you're that good at this particular thing. And only you know whether you actually think you're capable of that, and then you need to demonstrate it. Or if you're honest, like there are multiple things I'm not good at, and to be able to recognize that and go, yeah, okay, that's hard. That's very hard to do, but it's really important and
it's
growing.
hard too when other people are telling you that you're really good at something that's not very glamorous. Like I remember leaving after 10 years and being told I was really good at taking notes of client meetings because I'd actually saved him from a legal case, but it was like, that's not very glamorous. I'm an architect, you know.
But it's critical. It's so important.
But yeah, it's just not glamorous. Yeah. Justine, do you want to wrap up, or? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, I muted myself because my children were being too noisy. I'm very conscious that we always run over when Naomi's not here to keep me on time. So perhaps we should try to wrap up. Kim, you had a good comment yourself in the chat about wrapping up, but I just want to go back to Shelley and Diana quickly and just ask if you have any particular tips for those out there who are experiencing career breaks that were unexpected and unwelcome and might well be having crises of confidence and identity as a result of that. Just maybe a couple, you know, sort of top 2 or 3 things to kind of keep front of mind and to try and get yourself through and out the other side to somewhere more interesting.
Can you say that again, the question?
Well, it's very long, wasn't it? Okay, those people who are having unexpected and possibly unwanted career breaks and might be suffering as a result of that, what would your top tips be to kind of strategies to get through that and get somewhere more interesting?
Yeah, I think the old cliche is actually very true, which is one door closes and another one opens. It's so true. It's just that the corridors in between those doors can sometimes be winding and can seem a little bit long and uncertain and unknown. But it's very true. Just remembering that alone can do wonders for your perception of the situation. Just remember that every break is an opportunity to recalibrate and ask yourself the big questions and realign your life and design it so that it can be the way you'd like it to be. Try not to make any decisions out of panic. Nurture your relationships, reach out to your contacts, because you would be amazed at how many people that you actually know, how many people you know. And people are so supportive, and opportunities can come up from the most unexpected places. And just remember who you are, and remember that you're great.
Yeah, and I would add, nurture yourself. And I'm, you know, men go get a facial and all that, you know, if you can. But I mean more than that. I just mean actually try to honour yourself and what you've achieved, and don't be too hard on yourself. But having done that, and part of that perhaps is talk to people that you trust, who you know love you, who will support you. And having got to a point of feeling that you're okay, you're perfectly worthy, good and okay human being and a capable person, then go and have conversations with people that you trust, but more on a professional level, people that you trust to be honest with you, but also respectful of you, and get their feedback. And I think talking to lots of people and getting some guidance, and get yourself into a position of strength to then look at your own self and feel like, okay, where could I be stronger? Or actually putting on that side, if I close my eyes and dream for a minute, what do I really want to be doing in my life? What is my life about, and where do I want to be going with it? And really, like with the design exercise, blank bit of paper, just see what pops out and don't judge it. Don't see whether you can get a laundry into it or whether it meets the regulations or not yet. Just see what that is. Maybe you'll decide you want to go and, I don't know, make bicycles or be a tour guide or, I don't know, paint or be a yoga teacher. I don't know, whatever. They're all okay. And then go, oh shit, that doesn't look anything like I thought where I was going. And then do the design exercise of the iterations and see actually maybe something is possible, and it might take you back to where you thought you were going, but you'll have more clarity about that and what it is that you want to achieve. That's what I would do.
Okay, I want to keep going, but we're not allowed to. Kim, what would you like to sum things up?
Well, I put it in the chat, but I just taking that whole notion of career break of one door opens window closes, door open, whatever that saying is, but you just got to be sort of looking, I guess, and part of that is being optimistic that there will be a window that opens, and that you just need to have that sense of curiosity. So kind of aligned to what Shelley's saying about taking care of yourself and nurturing yourself. It's just, yeah, just kind of keep looking out, not just looking in, because you know, you just need to keep being open to the world and experiences.
I would reiterate that. I would also say one of the things that you know, my own career break that Shelley helped coach me into leaving a job that was very important to my identity, was really interesting to see what people thought I could do once I'd left, once they knew that I was somewhere else. Things I'd never imagined I would find myself doing. I kind of just said yes to things for a while to see what happened, and it was quite interesting.
Yeah,
I seem to have become quite good at writing guides. Who knew? Who had any idea? Anyway, thank you all very, very much. Once again, I'd really like to thank our partners, and I know Alicia Bowes from Brickworks is here. Hi, Alicia. Thanks for coming yet again. We can only do these things because of the support of our partners like Brickworks, AWS, many universities. We really do appreciate that support. I have some very good news out of last week's session, which was fabulous with Margaret Devlin, in that Margaret is going to offer some online coaching to the Parlour community, which I will send a notice out about quite soon. It's going to be first come, first served, best, you know, first up, best dressed, whatever it is. So keep an eye out for that. We'll have another one next week of these sessions. I don't quite know what it will be yet, but it will be, I'm sure, interesting and engaging. So thanks for coming, and thanks for all the great comments. And I'm really sorry we didn't get to them all. There's so much good discussion in the chat. Thank you again to Shelley and Diana, and a little clap. We can have a little virtual clap for them.
Yeah. Thanks for having us. It was just, and thank you all so much for coming. It's great to see most of you on the screen there.
Thank you.
Or some of you, or maybe just half, I don't know how many, but it was great to be part of it, and wish you all good luck, particularly in these difficult times.
Yes.
Thanks to Kim for stepping up as host. Great.
Pleasure.